I really don't want to go to sleep anymore.
Okay.
It makes me to where I'm too scared. I really don't want to go to sleep.
Okay. Okay.
Why was this 10-year-old so scared of sleep? The answer lies in a night that started like any other. A night when Robin Doan lay in bed, safe in the home she shared with her family. A night when the dark was just a cue to sleep, until it wasn't. At 10 years old, Robin Doan woke up to something no child should ever have to experience. Back at the Children's Advocacy Center, Robin was asked, "Do you know why you're here today?" Something terrible happened inside that farmhouse, something unthinkable. And as the sun rose over the Texas Panhandle that morning, the nightmare was far from over. The 10-year-old Robin Doan lived a quiet life in a remote farmhouse with her mother, Michelle Conrad, her stepfather, Brian Conrad, and her older brother, Zach Doan. Her stepfather was a farmer, and her mother, 6 months pregnant, was preparing for the family's newest addition. It was the kind of life where days passed slowly, where the only sounds at night came from the wind rolling across the open fields. But on this night, something far more sinister shattered the silence. On the night of September 30th, 2005, Robin saw a nightmare, a dream where she heard gunshots so loud they penetrated through her ears. But when she woke up, the nightmare didn't end. The gunshots were real. The deafening cracks of gunfire tore through the house, and then came the screams, her mother's screams. Panic seized her as she jumped from her bed, crouching by the door, trying to make sense of the chaos. Then came the footsteps, heavy, unfamiliar, and closing in. The sound of boots pounding against the wooden floor sent terror through her body. She barely had time to react before she launched herself back into bed, pulling the covers over her and lying still, forcing herself to disappear into the darkness. Then came the shots once again. 2 rounds fired directly at her. One grazed her left leg, the other tore past her arm. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. The footsteps turned away, moving toward her brother's room. The gunshots started again. This time, there were no screams, only a faint, agonized moan before silence swallowed the house once more. However, this silence was far from peaceful. It told a story of misfortune that swallowed the happiness of a loving family. For 2.5 hours, Robin lay frozen in place, her body rigid, her breath shallow, forcing herself to remain invisible. The stench of gunpowder and blood clung to the air. The house, once filled with warmth, had become a graveyard of both bodies and dreams. But she couldn't stay there forever. Summoning every ounce of courage, she forced herself to move. Stepping over the carnage, she made her way to the phone and dialed 911. Her fingers trembled as she pressed each button, her heart pounding against her ribs. She knew one thing: whatever horror had unfolded in that house, she was the only one left to tell the story. However, hope lingered as she called for help. The nightmare wasn't over yet. The call came in just before dawn.
Sheriff's Office, 911.
Ma'am, there was a shootout in my house. I don't know who's alive in my house, and I'm scared.
Where are you at?
7142 Highway 70. It's about 13.3 miles out from the bowling alley. You don't pass the house, the next one over. I have a purple shirt on. I have purple pants on. Please, can you just send somebody out here?
Somebody's coming. Somebody's coming.
It was a child's weak voice, small and trembling, cutting through the static of the 911 dispatch. The little girl wanted help, for somebody to come to the house and somehow make this nightmare end. The operator tried to calm her down, repeating assurances that help was on the way. But out in the middle of nowhere, time stretched unbearably long. Robin Doan stood alone in the darkness. The walls around her, the only home she had ever known, were now painted with bloodstains of her only loved ones. Texas State Trooper Chad Brooks heard the call. He pressed his foot to the gas pedal, but no matter how fast he drove, it wasn't fast enough. "I heard my mama scream," Robin sobbed into the phone. The desperation in her voice clawed at his chest. It was a child's life that depended on him. He had to move fast. Somewhere beyond the static of the radio, Aaron Moriarty, a journalist from 48 Hours, was already asking the question that would haunt this case. Why this family? Why this house? Whoever had pulled the trigger hadn't just executed an entire household. They had left behind something they never intended to. A witness. 15 shots had torn through the farmhouse that night. And yet, Robin Doan had survived. The little girl gave directions with a clarity that she had just acquired. The incident had suddenly made her so much more responsible. It's on Highway 70, about 13.3 miles out from the bowling alley. She told the dispatcher that she had a purple shirt and purple pants on, making sure they identify her as soon as they reached the scene. It was as if listing these details gave her a grip on reality, something to anchor her in her world that had just collapsed. Trooper Brooks' headlights finally cut through the darkness. As his car rolled onto the gravel driveway, a small figure appeared, Robin, clutching the phone like a lifeline. She didn't wait. She ran straight to him. He caught her in his arms, and for a moment, she was just a terrified little girl. She spoke in frantic, desperate detail, telling him everything she had seen, everything she had heard. It was surreal how articulate she was, how she relayed the horror with such chilling precision. He told her it's going to be okay, but he knew better. Nothing about this was okay. He couldn't take her inside, not back into that house, not after what had happened. So he placed her in the patrol car and locked it, shielding her from the unfolding nightmare. Officers moved in with their guns drawn. The house had to be cleared and checked for survivors, if there were any left. The eerie quiet of the crime scene made every step feel heavier. Inside, the horrific truth awaited them. Sheriff Gary Henderson stood at the threshold, taking in the scene. There was no sign of struggle, no warning. It was as if life had been going on as normal, a coffee pot set to brew in the morning, a home preparing for the arrival of a new baby. It was until someone decided to snatch the piece of normality away. The east door had been kicked in. The shooter hadn't hesitated. Brian Conrad had been shot 3 times. Michelle, 6. Even the family dog, Molly, hadn't been spared. 2 bullets to silence her barking. Robin sat in the patrol car, her eyes locked on the front door. She didn't know what they were seeing inside. She only knew what she was hoping for. She told herself her family would come out any second now, that they would be okay, just like she was. But no one walked out, and in the haunting silence of that Texas dawn, Robin Doan realized she was truly left alone. Had the bullet pierced through her body, Robin Doan would not have lived to tell her story, but she had lived, and now the weight of that survival pressed against her like an unbearable force. Zach had not been so lucky. He had been shot 3 times in his sleep. He never woke up. Robin couldn't bring herself to ask the question that was clawing at her insides. Who else is alive? Chad Brooks, watching her, knew there was nothing he could do to undo what had happened. But he could do something, however small, to pull her back from the brink of losing it. When asked if there was anything she needed, her answer was heartbreakingly simple. She just wanted to feed her animals. And so, in the midst of the unimaginable horror, they did. He followed her to the barn, helping her toss hay to the goats. For a moment, Robin was just a little girl again, laughing at how much feed he tried to give them. The switch flipped. She spoke about how she and her brother Zach would play a game of feeding their animals. How it turned into a competition sometimes. Life almost felt normal again. But as soon as they stepped away from the barn, the illusion shattered. The nightmare crept back in. Robin clung to his arm, shaking, eyes wide with the truth she had finally gathered the courage to say aloud. She already knew the answer, but the weight of it pressed down on her as she hesitantly voiced the question. Was her mother and Brian coming back? No one wanted to say it, but she had to hear it. No, they weren't coming out. She was the only one who had walked out of that house alive. She tried to hold on to something, anything, to keep the pain at bay. And there was one thing, one small sense of ease. Zach never woke up. He never knew. He never felt it. And for that, Robin was grateful. 12 hours after the massacre, Robin found herself in a small room at the Bridge, a children's advocacy center. The walls closed in around her. A camera stared down from the corner, with a microphone near her face to record the horrors that she had faced. She sat across from an advocate, answering the questions she had already answered too many times. She admitted that she didn't want to close her eyes, because that was when the terror crept back in. Robin repeated what she had told the 911 operator: the gunshots, the screaming, the scary footsteps, and the silence that followed. The advocate pressed gently, asking if she had heard anyone speak on that fateful night. Robin shook her head. Because nobody talked, it was just a matter of minutes that someone walked in through the doors and took away all the lives in her home. She described what she had seen, or what she thought she had seen. A flash from the gun, a white face in the dark. Investigators listened carefully, knowing every detail could be crucial. When asked how many shots had been fired, Robin responded without hesitation. 15. And when they processed the crime scene, that's exactly what they found. 15 casings, 15 shots fired, a number burned into a 10-year-old girl's memory at 3 in the morning. She reached her limit then. Robin could no longer bear to talk about it. The interview ended, but for law enforcement it was the beginning of a mission. They had no suspects, no motive, no explanation, and most concerning of all, no guarantee that whoever had done this wasn't planning to do it again. Robin was placed under protection. The authorities weren't taking any chances. She was moved to a secure location with her biological father, stepmother, and stepsister. Surveillance cameras surrounded the perimeter. She wasn't allowed to leave for her own safety, except for the funeral. The community poured into the church, grief-stricken and also scared for their safety. The Conrads had been the kind of family people looked up to, humble, hardworking, unproblematic. Their deaths shattered the peace that the town once held. Robin sat in the pew, her eyes moving from casket to casket. First one, then another, then the third, again and again. What happened was not fair at all. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Meanwhile, Texas Rangers had set up surveillance, scanning the crowd for anything suspicious. But nothing stood out. Doors that were once left unlocked were now bolted shut. Rifles were moved from storage closets to bedside tables. Parents tucked their children in at night with one hand on the light switch and the other on a loaded gun. All had their guards up. Somewhere out there, a killer was still walking free. Investigators worked tirelessly, going through the evidence again and again. Shell casings, blood spatter, tire tracks, footprints that didn't belong to anyone in the house. But there was no DNA, no fingerprints, and no reason. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing had been stolen. So what was it? One theory emerged. A possible drug hit maybe. A violent mistake. The wrong house. But with every lead came a dead end. And the only question that mattered, the one that haunted every sleepless night, remained unanswered. Who did this? Meanwhile, in the state of Missouri, detectives were piecing together the McCool murders. The bullets left behind were an unusual size, the kind that wasn't commonly sold in stores. A deputy recalled a recent burglary report of a man named Scott King, who had reported that his son, Levi, had broken into his home, stolen weapons, and disappeared. The ammunition matched. The hunt was on. The Missouri sun had barely crept over the horizon when Matthew McCool's phone received a call. A relative's voice cracked through the line. He'd been trying to reach Matthew's mother, Dawn McCool, but there was no answer. A flicker of unease passed through Matthew, but he brushed it aside. It wasn't unusual for his mother to miss a call or two. By midday, he grew more concerned. He left work as his hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly as he drove toward his family home. When he arrived, his stomach lurched. A relative stood outside, pale and trembling. The words barely made it past his lips. They were dead. He delivered the news with a heavy finality. Matthew barely heard the rest. His mother and grandfather, Orley McCool, had been murdered. Detectives arrived, methodically combing the crime scene. Shell casings littered the floor, their metallic sheen catching the light. As we discussed before, the bullets were an unusual size. They were not the kind you would pick at a local sporting goods store. Sheriff Michael Hall recalled a recent burglary report. A neighbor, Scott King, had reported that his son, Levi, had broken into his gun safe and stolen several firearms. The ammo matched. Levi King, a name already known to law enforcement, a ghost that slithered through the cracks of the system. He'd torched a neighbor's house years earlier, spent a brief period in prison, then vanished from a halfway house. And now the blood of the McCools soaked into the floors of their home. Authorities wasted no time. A warrant was issued, and within hours, a nationwide alert went out for the McCools' stolen Dodge Dakota. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, a Border Patrol officer in El Paso, Texas, flagged a suspicious vehicle, a routine stop. But when the officer glanced at the man behind the wheel, something felt off. The truck's plates came back stolen. The driver's name was Levi King. They found guns in the truck bed. King remained eerily calm as investigators pressed him for answers, his demeanor unsettling in its emptiness. Then, just 15 minutes into the interrogation, he confessed. He recounted the first shot, how his target spun and collapsed. When questioned about the woman, his composure wavered for the briefest moment before he admitted to murdering her out of fear. With that, detectives had enough to tie him to the McCool murders. But King wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his expression unreadable, as if weighing whether to reveal something even darker. "There's 4 more in Texas." The words hung in the air. Detective Don Ruby's breath stopped for a second. Was King taunting them, or had his killing spree stretched even further? A gut-wrenching phone call confirmed their worst fears. A family in the Texas Panhandle had been slaughtered days earlier. It was the Doan family. Levi King's rampage had spanned 2 states and left 6 people dead. He had moved like a phantom through the night, executing strangers without hesitation. For what? A thrilling experience? Missouri took first claim to justice. King pleaded guilty and received 2 consecutive life sentences. But Texas wasn't as forgiving. The jury saw a monster, a man who killed because he could, because it exhilarated him. The courtroom was suffocating in its silence. Levi King sat motionless, his fate hanging in the balance. The man responsible for a senseless, merciless rampage that left multiple lives in ruin was about to learn his destiny. Gary Henderson, a resident of the devastated town, voiced the question that would forever haunt those left behind. Why? Why this family? Why this day? Why this town? But there were no answers, only the chilling realization that sometimes horror had no reason. It simply arrived, uninvited, unstoppable. Lynn Switzer, the former district attorney of Gray County, had no illusions about the kind of monster sitting in the defendant's chair. There truly are people out there who are just plain evil. Levi King is one of those people, she declared, her voice steady, in front of the jury. 12 people held the power to decide his fate, and she was asking them for the ultimate sentence, which was death. But the weight of justice is never easy to bear. Defense attorney Joe Marr Wilson understood that the sheer brutality of the crime could not be overlooked. The only hope was to convince the jury that permanent imprisonment was punishment enough, that ensuring he would never walk free again, never having the chance to hurt another soul, was justice in its own right. For Switzer, this case had consumed her, creeping into her dreams, seeping into her waking thoughts. Yet, despite her best efforts, the burden of uncertainty lingered, because in the pursuit of justice, there were no guarantees. The jury deliberated for nearly 8 excruciating hours, and when they returned, their verdict sent a shockwave through the courtroom. One juror refused to vote for the death penalty. One single holdout, standing firm against the others, sealed Levi King's fate. The sentence would be life without parole. Robin Doan, the lone survivor of King's killing spree, sat frozen as the decision was read. She turned to Switzer, saw the shadow of devastation flicker across her face. "It almost looked like she had failed us," Robin later recalled. But deep down, Robin knew the truth. Switzer had fought with everything she had. She had fought for her family. And for that, no words of gratitude would ever be enough. Levi King would be extradited back to Missouri to serve his sentence, and Robin was more than fine with that. "Texas is my state. I don't want you back in my state. You've already done your damage here." But even with King behind bars, Robin's battle was far from over. Pampa was more than just home. It was now a haunting ground. Every street and corner, a painful reminder of what had been stolen from her. Leaving felt like surrender, like she had admitted defeat. Yet staying meant facing the memories of that night over and over again. No matter where she went, the fear clung to her, inescapable and all too real. Those closest to her saw the wounds that couldn't be bandaged, the scars that remained unseen. Denise Mackey, her former coach and confidant, had witnessed the quiet torment Robin carried. The nightmares, the echoes of her mother's screams, the relentless grip of fear, none of it ever truly faded. Late at night, Robin's messages would come. She heard things. She was scared. And no matter how composed she seemed on the surface, the darkness still lived inside her. Superstition became her shield against the darkness. That night, I had on socks, long sleeves, and long pants. I will never sleep in long sleeves, long pants, or socks again. I won't sleep with my door open. I feel like there's a figure standing in my doorway. Every time Robin walked into an empty house, she checked every room, every closet, making sure no one was there, even though the real nightmare had already passed. Some things, though, could never be shut away. Birthdays were the hardest, painful reminders of what she had lost. Even her own didn't feel right without them. Robin wanted her mom, her family, her life back. She had tried therapy, but it didn't help. If she needed to talk, she turned to her family or the officers who had been there. She thinks a stranger cannot understand. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be seen as different. Robin just wanted to feel normal, but normal would always be out of reach. Levi King had walked into her life like a nightmare and took away everything she ever loved. No verdict, no prison sentence could ever undo what he had taken. The painful memories were hers to bear alone. Still, there were people who refused to let her walk this path without support. Those who truly understood her pain stood by her, determined to help her find a way forward, even if that road was still shrouded in darkness, and Robin is forever grateful for that. However, she still questions, why did that monster snatch her innocent years? If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more